Bauermeyer had 10 children who eventually set up financial banking empires all over Europe. They became the richest men in the world. They were able to bribe leaders to do whatever they wanted them to do. Their main goal was world domination. Over time, they became banks for monarchs and governments. They would make agreements to totally manage the money supply of entire nations. They got into the printing business and started printing money for countries. The paper notes were recognized by the governments as the only legal tender for payment of taxes. Printing and managing all this money made great profits for them. The wealthier they got, the more money they could extort. The more debt a government accumulated, the more money was needed to be printed to pay the taxes. The fastest and easiest way to put governments in debt was to cause wars. They formed banks and manipulated governments into wars, financing both fighting sides. They reaped great profits rebuilding what the wars tore down. The more debt people accumulated, the more money was needed to be printed to pay it off. The fastest and easiest way to put people in debt was to cause economic depressions. The poorer the people were, the richer the Rothchild clan became. Losses of people became the gains of banks. Money had such power that eventually Meyer's grandchildren and great-grandchildren ended up controlling all of the businesses in the world, from the media to agriculture and health. They ended up being able to decide and control what people saw and heard, what they ate, and how they lived. Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Workers of the world, unite! A new breed of man was evolving under morals as espoused by capitalism. This was an extension to the belief of evolution of life, where the evolution is driven by a survival of the fittest rule. This was a time when the poor were rebelling over the rich, and society was greatly divided between the few noble rich and the masses of poor commoners. A call was made for a Jewish boy to be born in a time of great social disruption and upheavals in Germany. I applied and got the reincarnation. I was born into a Jewish family and had 6 siblings. My father was a lawyer. In order to practice his profession, he had to convert into a Christian. In silent protest, he joined the Protestant Church of Lutherans. I was educated at home by my father until I was 13 years old. At the age of 17, my father enrolled me to study law in Bonn. I became president of a drinking society and nearly failed my year. I wanted to study philosophy, but my father refused to pay for my studies. Suspecting and assuming that I was among bad company, he had me transferred to the University of Berlin. The company of drinking sophomore buddies I kept changed to thinking philosophers and journalists I met. I acquired a reputation as a rebel rouser and became a well-respected scholar on society, its politics, its religion, and its history and economy. At age 23, I married a daughter of a baron. Her family disowned her, leaving us in poverty with 7 children. Only 3 of our children survived to adulthood. I worked as a foreign correspondent, writing articles for Engels, a journalist in England. Engels and I wrote the Communist Manifesto. It caused such a revolutionary upheaval that I was arrested many times. I never quit, but fortunately I was acquitted each time. I eventually moved to London, where I stayed and wrote as a journalist. I elaborated on my theory of value and exploitation and argued that it would ultimately lead to the collapse of capitalism. I believe that the mismatch of economy governed by the wants of the rich and the needs of the poor is a major source of the social disruption and conflict that was witnessed. The more I studied the historical trends of economy, the more convinced I became that the poor masses could be liberated from their oppressive masters only when capitalism was replaced by communism. I became a voice for the working class of all people from all nations. Soon after I died, the Russian people overthrew their greedy monarchs. Many of my ideas were incorporated into their new form of governance. Soon after that, many other governments in the world also incorporated many of my ideas into their policies.